All right, welcome to the Red Alert Podcast. I know a lot of people were waiting for this moment because they were saying, like, when is the next Red Alert Podcast? And I was telling them, I don't know when the next Red Alert Podcast will be, but I know that Cindy will be here. But Cindy is having phone problems, so she is here kind of in her, like, soliloquy. And
I promise I'm getting a new phone this next week and I will be on video cuz I love
now,
to
I think they
see
call it
people.
incognito. That's what they call it in the military. You are incognito, like you're not really, you don't, no one knows where you are, kind of thing. For me, it's kind of stressful because I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're planning. I don't know who you're with, and this could be a very tense situation because if you are with someone like of the Red Wings ilk, I gotta watch what I say. Now,
I promise you I
if you're
there
with
is
your
no
Hollywood
one.
friend, I can't make fun of some people. Like, there's just I can't.
That's right. That's right. Well, the good news is I don't normally have spectators when I'm doing the podcast. That time is just for you and all of our listeners. So, but
Yeah.
maybe sometime soon here in 2024 we'll have some surprise guests on, and I'll just have people here and we'll have them pop on camera just for fun.
That would be fun. But we got a lot to talk about with this Detroit Red Wings team. Obviously, if we talk about the Red Wings, we talk about before we like went into Christmas break, right? We were talking about they needed to get started fast. Well, they went like I think they went the last four games of 2020 2023. They went 1-2. So that was not ideal by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
and so you like look at the last six games. I got them right here. Obviously, they lost to New Jersey. They lost to Minnesota. They win against Nashville. They lose against Boston. Like all the home games, they lose except one. They played two games on the road, so there you go. And then they won the San Jose Sharks and the LA Kings game, and those were high scoring games as well. But it's this part of the schedule kind of sets up for the Detroit Red Wings because number one, after tomorrow's game against the Ducks, they're going to get a nice day layoff, a couple days layoff, 4 days, I think it is, and they need to get Husso back and they need to get healthy. So this is probably the best part of the whole podcast because the Red Wings are finally going to get healthy, and that's exactly what they need to do.
Well, absolutely. And I'll tell you, this 50-50 win ratio is not going to be good enough. About a month ago, I was talking to my good friend Darren McCarty. Everybody knows Darren, and we're really good friends and having this conversation. And I was quite frankly losing my shit. I mean, I really was. I was losing it because I just saw kind of this decline coming at a time when, they did this last year, right about this time. They had that same, I saw them going on that same trajectory. I was getting concerned. I was, and Darren's like, Cindy, it's, don't panic yet. Don't panic yet. Well, interestingly enough, earlier this week, I saw Darren on his podcast and on a network that shall not be named. He that shall not be named. And no, but I saw Darren and the question was the question was, is it time to panic? And he was really now saying at this point, um, he didn't say panic, but what he definitely said is it's not going to be good enough. What the Wings have done in the month of December is not good enough to be competitive for a playoff spot. And they have put themselves in this position. They have put themselves in this situation where now they're kind of climbing up the mountain. And we're going to talk about that in this podcast too, Joe. What is the potential path to the playoffs for the Red Wings? Darren suggested that they need to win 7 out of the next 10 games in order
Yeah.
to build some momentum and position themselves for a playoff spot before the All-Star break. So we'll talk about that
Mhm.
later. But is it time to panic? It's definitely time to be concerned.
I don't think it's time to panic by any stretch of the imagination. I think, look, you get into the season of you get into this part of the season, it's always time to be careful and concerned about how you're playing. And I think when you move forward, I think there's a couple of things you got to look at. Number one, the goaltending has to get better. Just plain and simple. I mean, if I could bring up the stats right here, the goals against average for the Detroit Red Wings is 26 in the NHL. They face 26 most shots in the NHL. So when I look at that and I look at their offensive numbers, there's no way that they should be struggling like they are. They need to get their defense figured out, and they need to get their goaltending figured out. That's what they need to get figured out. And you know what? As much as we like Newsy, this is his time to earn his keep. Because as I've said with Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson with the Detroit Lions on that podcast, the Detroit Lions News podcast, you got to earn your money. You know, your job is predicated on results. You know, as a politician, Cindy, your job is also predicated on results. You know, as a podcast person like I do, my job is predicated on results. If no one listens to the show, no one watches the show, and no one cares about the show, and no one follows the show, well, then guess what? Not doing it.
Like right. That's not gonna cut it.
It's that simple, and it's
yeah.
It's funny because I think people make up these outliers where they're like, well, it's a defense. Well, it's the goaltending. Well, you know what? We got to figure it out because this is your team. This is obviously the team Stevie Y put together. And I mean, there's days where they play really, really good, and there's days where they can't keep the puck out of their net. And the fact of the matter is, when they don't score 4 goals, they are winless. I hope that's incredible at this point of the season. It's incredible.
Well, and that's because they're letting too many in, as you said.
And that's part of the reason that Newsy Lalonde has to get his ass in gear and make some coaching adjustments, get some things situated. I mean, it's not a talent issue if you are losing games if you don't score 4 goals. That's not a talent issue. I mean, every guy that you have on this roster is an NHL defenseman. Now, what pair they should be on, that's different. But right now, you have players that are playing good and then they play bad. And I'm starting to think that it's more coaching related than it is player related, in my opinion.
I think you could be onto something. And granted, too, I like Lalonde as well. I think, and Darren and I had a conversation about this as well, and I'll kind of let everybody in on our insights in terms of what we were talking about. But I believe there's a consensus, okay, that what's happening with Newsy Lalonde is the fact that the coaching strategies and techniques that he's implementing are really for more mature players. They're for more, a more, and I don't mean necessarily mature as in veterans versus, kind of like younger guys, maybe 2, 3, 4 year guys in, but a more mature team. Okay. This team, this collection of talent has not played together long or much. There's been a lot of personnel changes, and we talked a little bit about that, actually a lot about that this season, about the gelling and when that happens and how important it is. And the thing is, if you're trying to implement coaching techniques and strategies meant for a more gelled, a more mature team, who's played together for a while, if you're trying to implement that in a team of guys who really hasn't, it's not going to work out so well. So I agree with you. I think he needs to change his tactic and strategy. Scotty Bowman learned this as well when he brought in the Russian Five, brought on all this great Russian talent. They did tremendously well in Russia. But what happened is he tried to fit them into a North American model of play, and it didn't work out. It's not that those guys got less talented. It's just that they were not in a system that they had been successful with, and it just didn't work for them. So he had to make that adjustment. So with regards to your question or your comment about adjustment, that's a perfect example of that. And I think that Derek Lalonde has to adopt a different model for the team that he's got.
Yeah, more as much as anybody with the staff that you have, in your political career, that sometimes you have to revert course. Sometimes what you have on your roster, in terms of your people that you employ and the people that you have, they're not going to be always what you want. I don't think Victor Hedman is walking through that door for the Detroit Red Wings. I don't think that Mikhail Sergachev is walking through that door for the Detroit Red Wings. So at some point you have to make up your mind and kind of figure out things. And it doesn't really matter which way you kind of lean. I feel like the Newsy Lalonde is more of He's a defensive type of head coach. So it's time for him to make his hay on the defensive side of the ball. We've seen it with Dan Campbell with the Lions. When the offense wasn't really playing up to his ilk, and he's an offensive type coach, he made the change. He took over the play calling. He kind of made it his, and then Ben Johnson took over the same kind of play calling that Dan Campbell went with. So what I'm saying is this is a critical time for the Red Wings. I agree with Darren McCarty on that this is a very critical time, especially when you think about you got some games coming up, and I'll put them up here. That in the next week, you got the Ducks, you got the Oilers and the Kings at home. You have to win 3 of these. That's my opinion. You have to win 3 of these. Now I can go with 2, but you need to win either the Ducks, the Kings, or the Oilers, and it'd be nice if you could sweep all 3. Because what I see right now is you got 2 home games, and we've been hitting on this forever, Cindy, me and you. The Red Wings' home record is not good. And I don't know what we're going to do about it, but their home record has not been good enough.
Yeah, that's been an ongoing challenge for them. And, it's interesting. We talk about those 3 games, and you're saying how you feel we need to win them. I'll tell you what, I did a little bit of an analysis, and I think we're going to win them, and I'll tell you why. First off, Anaheim. We talked about this West Coast road trip. It's always a challenge for the Wings. Even Darren alluded to that on his podcast. When they used to go out west, it's just for some reason that's just a challenge for them. And we've talked in the past about why that is. However, Anaheim is not doing well right now. According to the Sharps bettors, Detroit, and for those who don't know what a sharp bettor is basically professional gamblers, professional bettors, and they have really good track records. According to the sharp money is on Detroit. According to the odds, right? Detroit has a 58% chance to win that game against the Ducks. I think they're going to. I think they've got some confidence and momentum coming off those 2 wins in San Jose and LA. I think they're going to beat the Ducks. When they come home to play Edmonton, let's take a look at some of the facts about playing the Edmonton Oilers on home ice, okay? Edmonton right now is on a 6-game win streak. I think they're probably due for a loss, to be honest with you. And they're going to have to play the Chicago Blackhawks before they come to play us. So they're coming off a home streak, but then they have to head to Chicago. And then 2 days later, they have to play us. And it'll be if the Wings win in Anaheim, which I think they will, that means they're coming off a huge high of winning the 3 games out on the West Coast. They come back, they're going to play Edmonton. I think Edmonton will be due for a loss. I think the Red Wings are going to be riding a streak. I think they're going to beat Edmonton. And then 2 days later, the LA Kings come to town. The good news for Detroit with the LA Kings, right, is LA Kings are on a 4-game losing streak right now. They're going to be looking for, for a win, right? But the Kings are going to be in the middle of a very long road trip, and they'll have had 3 games where they're going to be in some serious competition before they come here. They're going to be getting beat up. They got the Caps, the Lightning, and the Panthers before they come to Detroit on that road trip. Yeah, tough schedule. They have a very tough road trip for them. And I'm hoping that the Lightning and the Panthers, maybe even the Caps, can beat them up pretty good. So when they come to Detroit, even if they have, if they're having to slog through those last 3 games, they're going to come in tired. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm hoping for. We have a pretty decent home ice record against the LA Kings. So I think we've got an opportunity there. I think we're on a streak. I think we're going to win these next 3 games, Joe.
I think it'd be well versed if they do. I think this is, Darren hit on it. It's a critical time of the season, and it is a critical time of the season. We talk about it all the time on this podcast that at some point the Red Wings are going to have to make kind of a move. They're going to have to make a run because what they did in December wasn't really that good enough, and what they're doing right now is good enough, but it has to be sustained for a little bit. And you're in the hard division, no doubt about it. If you're in any other division, you kind of be in a better spot than you are. But when I look at this team and I look at the next 3 games, I think the Ducks game is winnable. I look at the Oilers and I say, as good as they are, their goaltending can be like ours, where it can be shoddy at sometimes. And then I look at the Kings, and like you said, they have that tough road trip coming into Detroit. It's not going to be easy for them. So it's a game that you should win. If there's any game that they should lose, it would be the Edmonton Oilers.
I agree with you. I think that's going to be the toughest one to win. But I think they're going to do it. I think they can do it. But certainly I think their best opportunity of those 3 games is going to be the Anaheim Ducks, followed by the Kings. And then I think the Oilers is going to be the toughest. But, one of the other challenges that I see the Detroit Red Wings still have, and we tend to compare the Lions with the Wings a lot, because those were kind of the 2 teams we saw really a lot of similarities between the two. And you mentioned quite a bit about Dan Campbell, and obviously, everybody's familiar with his style and so forth. The one thing that Dan Campbell has brought to the Detroit Lions that Derek Lalonde has not brought to the Red Wings is a sense of identity. The Red Wings still don't have an identity. And
Yep.
I don't fault Newsy Lalonde for that. I really don't. I think it's challenging to build an identity when you have constantly changing personnel. I mean, it's really tough. But I do think it is his responsibility, and quite frankly, Dylan Larkin's responsibility to kind of shoulder that weight. And so, unfortunately, like you said, though, it's time to earn your money for both of those gentlemen. Now's the time. You got to earn your check. And one of the things you got to do is you got to shoulder quite a bit of this responsibility to get this team an identity and to get the momentum moving in the right direction. They've got a good start of that. Hopefully they'll continue it with these next 3 games here.
Yeah, I look at these next 3 games, and these are huge games, but you hit on it. I think there is no identity with the Red Wings right now. And I think that's a huge issue. I think that if you're talking about the Red Wings, we're used to the Red Wings having an identity at some point. I think the identity is going to come down the line with some of the prospects they have in the pool. We're going to talk about that in a minute, because I love that. There's one guy that I'm absolutely in love with, and I think that he's going to be the future. So I'm just going to get that. But yeah, they don't have an identity right now. I think they're trying to form an identity, and I kind of, you said it's not Newsy Lalonde's fault, but it is his fault, because an identity doesn't have to be built with talent. It has to be built with the way that you play the game. And I don't think that the Newsy Lalonde puts a good enough kind of I don't think he puts a good enough kind of identity, what we want out of our players out there. I think it's more like, oh, we want them to be defensive. But you know what? The fact of the matter is, you traded for Alex DeBrincat, you signed Patrick Kane. You're not a defensive team. Let's just be honest. So at some point in time, you're gonna have to figure out what's your identity and go from there. And I think that Newsy Lalonde saying that the identity is defense and defense absolutely sucks is not a good identity. So I think they need to do something. And look, they might go trade for a guy at the deadline, maybe, but they have issues at that back end. And hopefully Husso comes back and plays as good as he did before this year. Last year was great, but this year he has been absolutely terrible. And I hope that Alex Lyon can kind of keep it going, but I'm kind of reluctant to say that too. So it's just not a good situation.
The thing is, I think there's somewhat of a disconnect between the culture hasn't been solidified yet, right? I mean, Detroit historically has had a gritty culture. I think we do very well when we go in there as kind of the gritty underdogs, or just even we're tough and all this kind of stuff. Lalonde does not have that persona. He's not a gritty, risk-taking kind of a guy. I mean, he just doesn't seem to have that style about him. And he seems a little bit more passive. And I'm not so sure that works for this team and for the culture that needs to happen. They got to pull themselves out of the gutter, and the only way, which is where they're kind of headed. They're not there yet. I mean, we're not the Chicago Blackhawks, thank God. But in order to pull them up from where they're at, Dan Campbell said,
"Oh,
how do you think we got to where we are? By being risky, by being gritty." And Derek Lalonde needs to change that kind of persona. I mean, Scotty Bowman, he was a tough guy. Mike Babcock, for as much as people hated him sometimes, he's a tough customer. You know what I mean? You don't want to screw
Yep.
with either one of those guys. Derek Lalonde
Yep.
doesn't have that same type of passion and that same type of persona.
Agreed. Oh, speaking of the Chicago Blackhawks,
Yeah,
we talked about this a year ago in regards to Connor Bedard. You know, the size factor and everything like that, right? Well, today it comes out that he fractured his jaw and he's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks, which isn't a size thing, but it kind of is a size thing. And obviously, if you're the Chicago Blackhawks, you're worried about Connor Bedard's health going forward because fracturing your jaw is not a big deal in terms of the recovery. But getting hit in the head is definitely something that you should look at. And I hope to God, because he's a good kid and he plays hard and he's a fabulous player. But like I feel like the NHL has done a disservice to these players, especially with the smaller players coming in the NHL right now. Like if you got Connor Bedard, you need to bring back the instigator rule. You know, I think it's funny because there's a lot of leagues that'll gravitate to their superstars, and I don't think you're getting a superstar like Connor McDavid anytime soon. You know, a tall, you know, big guy that's gonna he's gonna push his own weight around. You know what I'm saying? He can handle himself. But some of these kids that are coming up the pike in terms of talent, they're smaller. They're way smaller than they've ever been before. And I think you have to bring back you have to get rid of the instigator rule because you got to protect some of these kids because they're coming in here 5'10, 5'11, 5'8. And you know, I've heard Darren McCarty, your boy, talk about this, that they need to bring back the instigator rule. And I think that if they're smart, I think they should. That's my opinion. Because I think that the NHL is going towards a path, if they're smart, they need to protect their superstars, kind of like the NFL does. The NBA overdoes it, so that don't take any cues from them at all. I mean, you'll get penalties every freaking play if you take the LeBron route. So,
right.
so it's just the way it goes, and it's kind of like a happy medium. But if I'm the NHL, if I'm Gary Bettman, you know, we talked about it before about the size of Connor Bedard. He's a fantastic player, but at some point, the size. You know what? Size does matter. Okay.
Yes, it sure does.
In all facets of life, it does. So
it does.
I don't.
Let's put it this way, Joe. Let's say this. It can matter. It can matter. And the thing of it is, with regards to Connor Bedard, you know, I had quite a bit to say about him. I've been watching this kid pretty closely because I'll be honest with you, I'm a little concerned about him on a number of different levels, both professionally and personally. I'm just being a little more cautious when it comes to, you know, kind of his development and his future and all that kind of stuff. But a couple of points on Connor Bedard. Number one, this is a great teachable moment to remind everybody that, you know, every time the draft comes around, people are pissed that the Detroit Red Wings never, you know, seem to catch a break in the draft. And the fact of the matter is that you could have a superstar generational talent, first overall pick like Connor Bedard, and it isn't going to make your team any better necessarily. He hasn't done any favors for Chicago. They're in the last place and probably damn near getting to be, you know, mathematically eliminated from even being able to make the playoffs. So it's kind of like that doesn't necessarily mean success for your team. It's success for Connor Bedard. I mean, it makes him look like a superstar. He's going to the All-Star game because he's the best Chicago's got because they suck so bad. So, I mean, what does that tell you? It tells you everything you need to know, right, Joe? That's your line. It tells you everything you need to know.
I mean, well, it tells you everything you need to know. And then the second part about it is, you know, you brought up a good point. I mean, here's the thing. You don't build a hockey team with one player. You know, I know a lot of people think that, like, if you get a Connor McDavid, you're going to be great. I mean, look at Connor McDavid and how great he is. He's one of the greatest players I've ever watched. I don't care what anybody says, he's better than Sidney Crosby.
And well, look at this. The Detroit Red Wings now have arguably one of the greatest players of all time in Patrick Kane, and we're struggling. And it's not Kane's fault at all. He certainly wasn't going to be a savior or a messiah for the Detroit Red Wings.
Well, that's my point, Cindy. You know, you got, you know, Patrick Kane's obviously older, but when you got like a guy like McDavid, right? As good as he is, they haven't gone to a Stanley Cup final yet. as great as Connor McDavid is, they haven't gone to a Stanley Cup final. It tells you that hockey's still a team game, and if you don't have depth, if you don't have talent throughout the lineup, you're probably not going to go far. Now, your superstar can only take you so far. I think the Red Wings kind of figured it out like in the middle of the 90s, like the 94-95 season. I think they figured it out with Steve Yzerman. And then, I think Sidney Crosby with the Penguins, I think in 2007, 2008, they kind of figured that out. I think if you're the Oilers, they've never figured it out. And they kind of won't.
Right. Well, they're spending, in as far as the Oilers go, I mean, the problem is they're just way off balance in terms of where their capital is going. They got way too much committed to too few guys, and then they can't balance out the rest. I think it's a balancing problem with their capital investment. But
it's also because they're in Canada.
Absolutely, that's certainly a factor. Yeah.
I was reading something the other day. I forget. I think I saved it, but I don't know where it is. But basically, if William Nylander, which is for the Maple Leafs, he's their forward. If the Leafs were to keep him, and they were to re-sign him to a deal, they'd have to sign him at $13.5 million. To put that into perspective, the Red Wings would only have to spend 10.3. The Lightning and the Panthers could spend 9.3. And I think it was, if the Rangers wanted them, I think it'd be like 12.2. So that's the taxes of the game that kind of come into the game. I don't think people really realize how much that kind of matters. Where you live kind of is key. Like if you're in Florida, a guy like there's a lot of Lions fans. They want this guy Josh Allen. He's a defensive end, and he's projected to make like 20. He's projected to make like $18 million in Florida. But if you go outside of Florida, let's say you go to Michigan, he's projected to make $25 million a year. That's a lot of money, man. It's a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And it's because of the taxes. Yep. And that's why I always tell people, I hate this salary cap in the NHL, because it's never going to be good for these Canadian teams. There will never be a Canadian team that wins a championship anytime soon until its cap is gone. That's just my opinion. Because there's no way in hell, unless you get severely lucky on building a team full of, try-hard guys, or just kind of like the Vegas Golden Knights kind of thing. But the Maple Leafs are never winning a Stanley Cup. I don't care how you slice it. They can't afford it unless they get rid of some of their players.
Yeah, they've made some really poor decisions in both those organizations, and yeah, they're up against a number of unique factors when you're dealing with the Canadian markets and all of the regulations that go on in the taxing issues and all that kind of stuff. The other thing with your issue or your discussion about the instigator rule, the fact that the reason why these players are getting smaller, obviously, is the transition of the game from a physical game to more of a speed game, and you're faster when you're smaller. It's one of the advantages, right? So you're going to see more of that, and I think that might make some sense to do that. So the other thing with Connor Bedard is that, again, his health. I'd like to touch on that because I think that's important. The fact that he's now had a significant, relatively speaking, his first significant injury that's going to sideline him for a while. He's pretty much been going about his NHL career, I don't want to say untouched, but he certainly has had a bit of a pass, I think, in certain regards. And now I think some of the reality of the NHL is coming home to roost with him, and he might start skating with a bit of fear now, or at least apprehension. He may not be skating with the same kind of fearlessness and proceeding with the same kind of fearlessness as he had prior to getting injured. You've got, when people are in car accidents, even getting in a car after that is a little bit traumatic. It sometimes takes some time, and they have actual physical responses to being in a vehicle when you've been in a car accident. It's the same kind of thing. The guy got his jaw fractured.
I remember a time, Cindy, I was driving to your house and I got rear-ended. Remember that? And now every time I go down 94 and we go even now, it's like I'll be like, oh, is this guy gonna freaking hit me because he's on his phone? It's kind of what you do, and I think it's the same thing with hockey. Like, if you take a hit like Connor Bedard took, are you less kind of likely to make a kind of risky play in terms of trying to slice up the middle? Probably. It's probably going to weigh heavy on him. I know that all these athletes say no. I'll get back to the way I play and all that jazz, but that's not the truth. Because I talked to a guy before who tore his ACL, and he said that he was so deathly afraid in the first like couple games that he played that he played football, so it's kind of different, but it's
Yeah.
not different. It's the mind of an athlete, and he said when he would cut, when he would make a move, he was so afraid that his knee would fall apart again. And that's kind of like the mindset of an athlete. Like if you take a hit over the middle like Connor Bedard took, when you go over the middle again after coming back, it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of get that emotion that you're going to get hit again like that. It's going to be hard, and it's very rare that you got a player that would take that and say, okay, I'll be fine. Well, guess what? A lot of times they're not fine for a little bit. And even Sidney Crosby, after his concussion that he had, he was even reluctant to go over the middle and take hits and stuff. That's just the way this game goes. And especially if you're a player like Connor Bedard, where the whole franchise is kind of hoping on you and relying on you, I'm pretty sure the Chicago Blackhawks organization is probably like, every time he goes over the middle for the next, when he comes back, they're gonna be like, oh no, 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 don't, no, and then oh yes, like he scores a goal, oh yes, great, but it goes over the middle, they're gonna be like, oh no, 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 like they're inside their head. That's what it's gonna be like.
Well, sure. I mean, because it's human nature, number one, it's human biology, and you've got muscle memory. Muscle memory for good things, muscle memory for bad things. And so there's going to be that reaction, regardless of his mental acuity or ability to overcome that or deal with it. He's still going to have that adjustment period on a couple games back. So, it's a situation where he's still very, very young. He's still a rookie. We can't forget the fact this is his first year, and he's still a very, very young man. So there's a lot of factors that are going on that may slow down his recovery from that. So anyway, it's just a matter of how does this affect the Detroit Red Wings? Well, hopefully, I think what's going to end up happening is the Edmonton Oilers are probably not going to have a bad game against Chicago. I think they'll probably win in Chicago. Maybe they're coming off with a little bit of overconfidence and give us an opportunity to take advantage of that and squeak a win out of them on the 11th. So let's look at it that way.
That'll be good, but let's get to I want to get to something that I was more privy to, Cindy. I don't know if you caught the World Juniors. Well, now we had some guys over in the World Juniors. Congrats to Trey Augustine, who was on the gold medal U.S. Junior team, which I'm so proud of the United States, because over the course of 20 years, this U.S. hockey program has went from, just cute to great. They've been great. The talent that they're popping out right now. I mean, you see with the Red Wings. I mean, Patrick Kane, Alex DeBrincat. You see with the Maple Leafs with Matthews. You see it all over the NHL. This Tkachuk, the Tkachuk brothers. There's so much American talent that's playing great. And there is a guy that the Red Wings have. Trey Augustine was 4-0 with a .936 save percentage for the gold medal U.S. Olympic hockey team. Now they went against the Swedes from Sweden, and there was two prospects on the Sweden team that the Red Wings fans are going to know. Obviously, you had Sedin Pellikka. He had 2 goals, 4 assists, and he was voted the top defenseman by the International, Hockey Federation. And then Johansson was a +1 in 7 games, which whatever. Danielson and Bicker, those are 2 prospects too. Danielson had 1 goal and 2 assists. Bicker had 1 goal and 3 assists. He's from the Germans. So I have a very, very bold thought, Cindy. Very bold thought.
Well, is this going to factor into this ongoing bromance that you have with Trey Augustine?
Well, okay. I don't have a bromance with Trey Augustine. I'm going to simply say this, though.
Yes, you do, but go ahead.
I know talent when I know talent, okay? And this Trey Augustine kid is probably one of the most legit prospects that the Red Wings have. And this Sandin Pellikka kid, I have a feeling that he's going to be like a superstar. I truly do. I feel like Steve Yzerman hit on the two picks that could potentially alter. I think everyone's looking for Simon Edvinsson and Cossa to be the future of those two positions, in terms of prospects, right? We know we got Seider, still there. But I think, the prospects, they look at Edvinsson and Cossa as the two guys that are going to kind of lead this team into the future.
Yeah.
I would be interested, and I would be reluctant to say that I think that Sandin Pellikka will be better than Edvinsson. And I think that Trey Augustine will be the future Detroit Red Wings goaltender above Sebastian Cossa. I truly believe that. I think that the way that this kid performed in the World Juniors, 4-0 with a .936 save percentage. Are you kidding me? I mean, he's 18. He just
I was
got
gonna say
the
he's
college.
not even 19 yet. Yeah.
He just got to college, and he's right down the road at East Lansing, and they're having a great hockey season. They had a bunch of kids that went to the World Juniors and played phenomenal, and so did Michigan. But Michigan State has a couple of guys on the Red Wings prospect pool that were like, okay, Brett Savage, Trey Augustine, and this Trey Augustine kid. I was listening to the Spit and Chicklets podcast, and I think it was Merles, which he's a former NHL player. He said this Trey Augustine kid kind of reminds him of like you know like a Henrik Lundqvist, a Jonathan Quick type player. And if that's the player that he becomes,
Wow, that's some high praise, man.
Yeah, I mean, if you're saying that Trey Augustine could be like a Jonathan Quick, a Henrik Lundqvist, those are two future Hall of Famers. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not like you're comparing them to like God love him, but Chris Osgood or Curtis Joseph. You're comparing him to Henrik Lundqvist, who is one of the best goalies of all time. Like, wow. I mean, I just think that the way Trey Augustine played throughout that whole World Juniors was phenomenal. And when he didn't play, you could kind of see that they played a different kind of style of hockey in front of the goaltender.
Yeah, I think his performance has just been stellar. But Sebastian Cossa started off similarly, and then struggled as he moved through his development. He's struggling a little bit. So I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to see exactly what you said. I wouldn't be surprised, but at the same time, I also wouldn't be surprised to see Trey Augustine facing some of the ongoing, challenges that we see Sebastian Cossa seeing. I think it's just part of the development. But I think both of those goaltenders will be outstanding additions and probably part of the long-term success of the Red Wings. Darren said it. I've said it. People don't think because I'm a girl, I don't know this stuff, but I told everybody, look, the Red Wings are not going to be Stanley Cup contenders this year or next year or possibly even the 2025 season. They're going to be competitors probably in 2026 going into 27. It's going to be a couple, 2-3 more years yet before you really see him being competitive, right? And Steve Yzerman is building this team for that moment. He's not building it for today. He's thinking more long-term. And I think that Sebastian Cossa and Trey Augustine could very well be either one or both of the goalies that we see on the Stanley Cup for the Detroit Red Wings, in the future here. So, if that happens and Trey Augustine runs into a little bit of I don't say a slump. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's a development phase. He's going to go through phases of his development. I think that wouldn't surprise me either. But at the end of the day, I think he may very well be exactly as you say.
Well, here's what I'll say. I think he's way different than Sebastian Cossa. Because I've heard, some of these guys from like the Spit and Chicklets and other podcasts and, listening to, people that play the game. And they always say that if you want a better player, more suited for the game right away, you draft a college player. Like you draft a college player. Because, I mean, I heard Rod Brundamore say this too. When his kid went to, what was it, Quinnipiac or whatever, he told his kid to go to college instead of the junior hockey route. The reason he said that, and it was very interesting to kind of note, Cindy, was he said that you're more prepared in college hockey which college hockey has changed incredibly. There's more players playing at a high level than there's ever been in college hockey
Oh yeah.
history.
Oh yeah.
And,
That's almost
and
flipped on its head, Joe, where it used to be juniors over
yep.
college. I agree. A lot of the sources I talked to inside the league are saying now it's almost switching, doing a 180 where now it's college over junior hockey.
Well, when Rod Brandamore said it, the way he said it kind of was like, he's like, look, I told my kid go to college hockey, kind of learn to become a man, because it's a more physical style game and it's more suited for the NHL. And he said that you're going to be better off going there than the junior route. And I just feel like as a goalie, it's probably better to go to the college route because I feel like the college goalies are more suited to become NHL goalies sooner. And my reason for this is, you got some college players that are like 24, 25. They're men, right? You got in the juniors, you don't have those guys. You just don't. So I feel like Sebastian Cossa playing in the juniors, I think he kind of hurt his development, especially playing in the league that he plays in. Because if you look at the league that, like the WHL is different from the Quebec Major Junior League or the OHL. It's just the way it is. College hockey, it's like if you're in the Big Ten, you're playing stars all over. If you play in the Hockey East, you're playing stars all over. I mean, you got Will Smith, you got Perreault, you got a bunch of guys. We got players everywhere. And I just think, Cindy, that like I think with Steve Eisman drafting some of the players that he's drafted, especially the last couple of years, I think that he's went away from the junior route kind of way. He's went more of the Swedish Elite Hockey League and the college hockey, and kind of because they're more suited to come up sooner. Obviously Simon Edmondson's kind of taking his time, but he's going to get there. But if it was a junior hockey player, like that guy, the guy who got traded, what was it, for DeBrincat, Sabrango, he was a junior hockey player, and they said he wasn't going to be ready for another 2 years. So it's kind of was hit or miss. And I think that if you're a goalie like Trey Augustine, I think if you come up from the college ranks, I think you're ready because we see it with the Buffalo Sabres. The kid that started at Northeastern, Devin Levi, he's their starting goaltender for the Buffalo Sabres now. Now he's not.
Yeah.
He's kind of struggling, but I think they brought him up too early. But that proves my point that like these kids that are in college, they come up way sooner than some of these junior kids.
Well, there's definitely an advantage to being exposed to a wider range of talent. And I think that's why Steve Yzerman is looking to the college ranks, looking to the international players, the Europeans. Europeans have a little bit of a challenge when they try to adapt to the North American game. But as you said, they've been exposed to a wide range of talent. They've been exposed to older, more experienced talent. And I'd say older, but more experienced, more mature talent. And yeah, that really leads to better preparation for professional level play. So, yeah, I can see we can certainly see evidence of that trend happening, and hopefully, the Red Wings will position themselves well in the next season or two to make a deeper run into the playoffs. Because I'll tell you what, when I'm looking at this schedule, and I'm looking at the possibility of trying to find another 6 wins in here over the next 9 games, because let's assume that we're going to count that LA Kings win, and now you got to win 6 more to find yourselves positioned for the playoffs. The thing of it is first off, those 6 wins are going to be tough to find. I'm going through it, and I'll tell you, and we're going to go through. We went through 3 of them already, Joe. I know we're going to go through a few more games here for the Red Wings coming up, but I'm interested in your take because as we go game by game, it was tough for me to find those 6 more wins. And if we make the playoffs, I think we're going to squeak in, and I do mean squeak in barely. And I think we're probably, whereas I had hopes before of going deeper into the playoffs, I think we're actually probably going to get knocked out in the first round unless we become a different team. I do think Patrick Kane has been a game, and not necessarily, I don't want to say a game changer because I'm with you. I don't think one guy makes a difference, but there is no doubt the value Patrick Kane has brought. And I think, with his recovery, he's been a little tentative, but now he's got some tremendous confidence I think, building post surgery,
Mhm.
post recovery, and I think that he's only going to get better. He's only going to get better as the season progresses. The question is, can the Wings address those other issues we talked about specifically defensively, in order to really capitalize on that? And I'm not sure there's enough time for that, but we'll have to see. You know, we've got you know what, another almost half the season, over half the season still left. So, but it's going to be critical. It's going to be critical that that we make the most out of this next 10-game stretch here.
So looking at the schedule, I know we were going to get to this, and obviously we're going to get to it, but the schedule, there's one key thing that I look at, and there's no back-to-backs. So that's a good thing. There's usually a day of rest in between. So I
Yeah.
think that's a plus for the Detroit Red Wings. But when you look at the schedule, we brought up the Ducks, the Oilers, and the Kings. 2 will be at home. 1's going to be on the road. That's going to be the Ducks, right?
Right.
But then you have 3 straight away games at Toronto, at Florida, and at Carolina.
Yep.
Now, I would be satisfied if they won just one of them, to be honest, because that's a tough road. But you got to look at the way other teams are playing. I mean, like the Florida Panthers. I mean, they're playing pretty well. I'm looking at the standings right now. Look at the standings right now. Florida's in second place in the division, and they've won 6 in a row. You go to Carolina, they've won 5 in a row. Toronto's won 2 in a row. They're 4-4-2. So maybe they're the team that you could pretty rely on. But that's a tough road because Florida's playing hot, Carolina's playing hot, and when you look at this Red Wings team, like I said, they got the Panthers, they got the Maple Leafs, and the Carolina Hurricanes, and then they got the Lightning, and then they got the Stars and the Flyers. That could be a win, but we've seen them drop a game to the Flyers, so it's a tough
Joe,
road.
Let me ask you this. So let's look. Let's kind of. We took the first. We talked about these next 3 games, which are all, going to be. We talked about the 3 games with the Anaheim, the Oilers, and the LA Kings. Now let's talk about the next 3 after that, because you just touched on them, and I think they're important. The Leafs, the Panthers, and the Hurricanes, and you'll be content to win just one. I got to tell you, I've got them winning just one of those, and I'll tell you who I've got them beating. I've got them winning against Carolina, and I'll tell you why. In the excuse me, the game against I don't know what happened. I was just like possessed by something there. Maybe because I have to say Toronto Maple Leafs and I can't stand them. But anyway, their game against the Leafs. Okay, here's the reality. The Leafs are on a 2-game win streak, as you pointed out. They are 50-50 at home, right? In the last 10 games, they won half of their home games. They've lost half. What's critical about that game is it's a division game, right? They're a division rival, and we're really fighting them for one of those playoff spots, or at least it's an important game in that regard. But here's the bad news. The bad news is that the Leafs are 8-2-0 in the last 10 games against the Wings. Particularly when the Wings play in Toronto, very, very tough. I think it's very likely that they're going to lose that game against Toronto. When they go
hold up.
You're disagreeing with me?
Because if you know anything about Toronto, they've been absolutely horrible at home this year. They are 9-7-2 at home. They are 10-3-5 on the road. Amazing. Again, we talk about all the time, like protecting home ice. You think home ice would be the better spot to win, right? And they're just not. And then I look at their injury to Joseph Wall, which is their goaltender. That's a critical injury. But I look at like the goals per game for the offense, and they're both near each other. But they also allow the same amount of goals allowed, and they give up shots. So I think that could be an offensive game that kind of suits the Red Wings. And I think that their home record kind of suits the Red Wings. Now, if you talk about the Carolina Panthers, the Carolina Hurricanes, like you said, I look at the Carolina Hurricanes and I go, okay, they're 10-3-3 at home. Pretty damn good. They're absolutely great with shots on goal. They're first in the league. Penalty kill, they're 9th in the league. And then they're 13th in goals against average. They allow 3 goals a game, pretty much. So they're a tough cookie to crack, especially at home. So if I was going to say what team is more beatable at this point in time, I'd say Toronto compared to Carolina. But if you want to say Carolina, you can say Carolina.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I hope we beat Toronto because we're in their division, and that's the one I'd prefer to win, but I think we're going to lose that one. The reason why I think we're going to win against Carolina's on a 5-game win streak right now. By the time the 19th comes around, we don't know what position they're going to be in. But at some point, all streaks have to end. And I think that if they're on a win streak, yeah, they might be running hot, but they're going to run up against a wall somewhere, and they're going to come across a couple losses. I think that Wings are going to play them at an opportune time for that. They're going to be on a long home stretch at that point. But their record in the last 11 games at home for the Carolina Hurricanes has been 6-5. So they're marginally better at home in the last 11. Their record against the Wings has been 5-5. So we got a 50% chance to beat Carolina. So I think that, and I think the Wings are going to be ready for a win at that point also. I don't know. For some reason, I just think for those reasons we're going to be Carolinas. I hope you're right. I hope I'm wrong, but we're opposite on that one. So given the fact that we're opposites on those two teams, I have to believe by process of elimination that we agree that they're going to lose to the Florida Panthers, that the Detroit Red Wings are going to lose to the Florida Panthers. I'll tell you why I think they're going to lose to the Panthers. Panthers are playing hot right now. They're going to be on a long home stretch too, so they'll have been nice and rested. The record against the Red Wings in the last 10 games for the Panthers has been 8-2-0. So incredibly well. And in their last 10 home games, Panthers have been 6-4 at home. So they got a good record at home. They've got a great record against the Wings at home, and they're running hot right now. So I think it's likely that we lose against the Panthers. Sounds like you feel the same way, Joe.
I mean, the Panthers, this is a critical part of the schedule kind of thing. You look at the goals per game for the offense, right? So Detroit's 3.56, they're 5th in the league. Florida has 3 goals a game, 21st in the league. Now you go, what are they special at? What are they special at? Because they're not special at offense. That's obvious. They get 3rd most shots on goal, and they're 21st in goals. But you look at their goals allowed, 3rd. You look at their shots on goals. Shot on goal allowed, they're 3rd. You look at their penalty kill, 6th. Like, they're a pretty damn good defensive team. So that's a game that if you're gonna win, and the Red Wings have shown that they cannot win games that they don't score 4 goals in. So I would say that's a loss as well.
Well, I'd love to see us come out of it with at least one. We've got to win at least one of those games. If we happen to pull off an upset and win 2 out of those 3, we're very well positioned, because then we run into our next 5 games, which are all at home. The Wings right now in their last 10 are 5-4-1 at home. So again, a marginal advantage, not as good as it should be. I think we can agree on that. Their first game when they come home from their road trip is against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I'll tell you, Joe, I have them winning that game. The reason why I like our chances against the Tampa Bay Lightning is because first off, I want them to win, because again, it's another division game against a division rival. That's important. Our record against Tampa Bay has been 3-2-0 in the last 5 games. More importantly, we are 4-1. The Wings are 4-1 at home against Tampa Bay. And there's one other stat that I'm looking at, and you might not agree with my methodology here, but I believe that one of the game changers, as I said, or definitely a huge impact factor for the Wings, has been Patrick Kane. Even more importantly is the partnership between Kane and Alex DeBrincat, and the fact that those are our top 2 performing forwards, right? Well, Dylan Larkin's up there too. But, So what I did is I looked at the career stats for both of those players against each one of these rivals. And when we look at their record against Tampa Bay, Kane has a negative. He's a -8, and DeBrincat's a +3. So I think that gives us, Kane's numbers aren't great against Tampa Bay, but DeBrincat's are. And so I think between the 2 of them and all of the other things, advantages that the Wings have going into Tampa Bay, I think they're going to win against the Lightning.
Yeah, you look at this Tampa Bay Lightning game versus the Red Wings, and they are similar on defense. They're Detroit's 26th in goals allowed. Tampa Bay's 25th. Shots on goal allowed. Detroit's 26th. The Lightning are 19th, but it's like 2 shots. Penalty kill. Detroit's 12th and Tampa Bay's 12th. 13th. And then you look at the penalty minutes. Tampa Bay takes a lot more. But if you look at the offense and you look at one key factor in this, if we're going to talk about that game in particular, the Tampa Bay Lightning are 8-11-2 on the road. They're 11-5-3 at home. So they're a much better home team than they are away. That's obvious right now. And then you look at their offense. Detroit is their power play is excellent. It's second in the league. But the Detroit Red Wings have a better shooting percentage. They're better with the goals per game. And I just think that this is a game that they should win because Tampa Bay's shown a propensity to lose on the road.
Yeah, I think we've got a great chance there. Now, here's the next one. Game number 9, what I call 9 out of 10, is a home game against the Dallas Stars. This can be a scary game only because the Wings' record against Dallas has been horrible. In the last 10, they've only won 1 out of the last 10 contests against Dallas. They're 1-4 at home against Dallas, so that doesn't help them. The Dallas Stars in almost every game score more than 3 goals against Detroit at home. So they're a high scoring team, which means that our offense is going to really have to not only, take over and do it and overproduce, produce over expectations, but also that really hits our weakness, which is our defense. So Dallas is going to be tough on a number of levels. Here is a bit of silver lining and where I think there may be hope for a win. First off, I'm going to make a bold prediction. I don't know if it's bold, but if you look at the stats, it's quite likely that Detroit is going to tie Dallas in regulation during this game because they've tied 4 out of the last 10 contests against Dallas. However, what's going to happen in overtime? Whereas what we have done historically is lost. I think Patrick Kane could be the difference in winning in overtime because he has been since he came with the Wings. And his career record against the Dallas Stars is a +17. Alex DeBrincat's career against the Dallas Stars is +11. I think that could make the difference that this time, if we go to overtime with the Stars, we beat them in overtime. That could result in a win, but the stats tell us up to now it's probably going to be a loss. But I'm going to hang my hat out there and say I think they're going to squeak out and win against Dallas if we go to overtime.
Yeah, I think if you go to overtime in any of these games, if you just get a point, that's crucial because any point matters, and every point does matter, especially in the NHL standings. I look at Dallas and I go, man, they're a really good team on the road, 10-4-3. At home, they're 12-6-2. That just tells you how good the Dallas Stars have been this year. And I look at them and I go, okay, what's their injury? They got 2 key injuries that are huge. Now, I don't know how long they will be out, but they have Miro Heiskanen, who is their top defenseman, who is out, and Jake Ottinger, which is a lower body injury, which I think is a severe injury from what I've heard. And that's a huge loss as well. Now, I don't know I know that their backup situation, they have a much better backup situation than Detroit because they have Scott Wedgwood, who played for the New Jersey Devils last year. But his goals against average is .311, .897 save percentage. So, obviously missing a guy like Ottinger, missing a guy like Heiskanen, those are going to be key losses to this team. And I think that if they're not back by that point when the Red Wings play them, they've lost 2 in a row right now. They're kind of struggling right now since the injury to Ottinger. They've lost some games that they've won 2 games, but they won those 2 games against the Blackhawks. So does that really count? Probably not. They lost against the Blues. They barely won against the Predators. That was a game that they eked out. They went to overtime in this stretch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a 10-game stretch. I mean, they're not a team that's they're kind of whistling by the graveyard kind of thing, and they're winning a lot of 1-goal games. And you got to think for a minute, like losing a guy like Ottinger, which is a great goaltender, and losing a guy like Heiskanen, that's going to come up to haunt you. I mean, when you lose that much talent in this league, it really doesn't bode well for you kind of in a long-term kind of output. So if they're out, I give the Red Wings the benefit of the doubt because I think they'll win that game in regulation.
Yeah, I think that's me of the next 10 games or 9 games, that's the one to watch. That's really the one to watch. Because if they do win that game, that gives them the 7 out of 10. They'll have already taken that'll be the 7 games out of 9. And then I'll be honest with you, the what I call game 10, which is the home game against the Flyers. I think Detroit's going to lose that game. The reason I say this is that Detroit is 4-6-0 in their last 10 against Philadelphia. They're
Mm-hmm.
3-2 at home against the Flyers, so that is an advantage for them. They do better at home against the Flyers than they do on the road. But both Kane and DeBrincat are both have minus records against the Flyers. So that doesn't mean that things can't change. But I think if we beat ourselves up beating Dallas, I think we're probably going to be a little tired coming into with Philadelphia, and I don't have as much hope for that one as I see possibilities for beating Dallas. And to me, it's really important we beat Dallas anyway. So when we're looking at those, and then the last 2 games, which is not part of that 10-game pack, if you will, the game, what I would call 11 and 12, the last 2 games before the All-Star break, you've got the Vegas Golden Knights and the Ottawa Senators. I actually think we're going to win against the Knights. We do relatively. I think we're going to do, we've been doing relatively well against them. It's a 50-50 shot, but I think we're going to beat the Vegas Golden Knights here at home. I think we're going to lose to the Ottawa Senators for some reason. They're like, Seattle for us. They're one of our Achilles heels. We just seem to struggle against the Sens. So I think they're going to split the last 2 before the All-Star break. But in that all important, as we're talking about this next, 10-game pack or whatever, I think we've laid out a path to victory for the Wings.
Well, I'm gonna take umbrage with what you said. The Flyers game, I think you're right. I think that's gonna be a tough game. I do look at it this so Cindy. They have no back-to-back schedule. I'm assuming Ville Husso will come back during this stretch. That's my presumption. So if Ville Husso comes back, I think that could help this team out pretty good because Alex Lyon and Husso, that'd be a pretty good goalie tandem. I look at the Flyers. They've lost 4 straight. Their away record is pretty damn good, but they've been a great team this year, but their goals for isn't that great. They've been a more defensive team. I don't know how long this can last when you're scoring 2.89 goals against in goals for in the NHL. So I look at that and I go, okay, that's kind of a game. But I look at the 2 games that you mentioned as game 11 and game 12, right? The Golden Knights and the Senators. Now I think that they're going to beat the Golden Knights because the Golden Knights have shown over this course of time that they're not good on the road, and they're missing a key player in Shea Theodore for undisclosed amount of time for upper body injury, and then their goalie Aiden Hill, he's on IR with an undisclosed injury. So I don't know what that means, but that's pretty difficult to kind of. Obviously we've seen them go with 5 goalies last year and win the Stanley Cup, but they're not good on the road. They've lost 2 straight, and to be honest, I think the Red Wings are a more better team than the Vegas Golden Knights right now. The Vegas Golden Knights have not really they haven't done anything that's made me go, wow, they're a great team, right? I watch the Carolina Hurricanes and I go, that's a great team. Like they're playing great right now. And I look at the Florida Panthers and go, that's a great team too. But for the most part, I like that game. And then Senators being at home, I like that better than the Detroit Red Wings going to Ottawa, right? I think Ottawa's been a house of horrors for Detroit. And I think that Detroit has been playing a lot better than Ottawa has. And I think that they should win that game. So if we look at this 12-game stretches, we forecast out, Cindy. I love the way the Red Wings are kind of put in a position. I think they can make a run like they did last year. And unlike last year, they're not far away from the playoffs. And this is kind of where you have to do this.
Yeah. And Darren agrees with us. He basically said, hey, the no time like the present, like you got to get on this right now, boys, because you don't have time. You don't have the luxury. You took advantage of that great start to the season. It made up for this little, not made up for this little dip, but it equalized. The dip equalized that. But now you are running out of time. You have to make a move now. You got to go on a run, and they can do it. I think we've laid out an opportunity for them to do it. And I think if they sweep this as we believe they will, we sweep this West Coast trip. I don't know the last time that happened for the Red Wings. So maybe that's going to build some momentum and be a turning point for them to come home and lock down those wins against Edmonton and LA, and then roll into Toronto. And hey, miracles could happen. Maybe that what'll happen is exactly as you laid out, Joe, and those next 3 games will go as you said, and then they'll find themselves in tremendous position.
Well, I look at it like this, Cindy. With this team, I think that they're better than they played. I think that they've ran into some troubles recently, and I think that they're going to get on a run here. And I look at this, and obviously, if they sweep the West Coast trip, I mean, I can't tell you the last time that's happened. But I look ahead to kind of forecasting like we have been. They play another West Coast trip in February, the Canadian road trip. And that's always a tough road trip. That's always a tough road trip for the Red Wings. It always has been. It's a tough road trip for any team going from east to west. But luckily, the luck of the draw is that that they're going to play the Calgary Flames. That should be a win. They're going to play the Kraken, who have been absolutely brutal this year. And they're gonna have a good chance to kind of make a run here.
I hate that Canadian trip. I hate it every year. It's always a challenge for us. So with a little luck, we'll be able to overcome that and do what needs to be done, and not blow any advantage or any grounds that are gained here in January. Hopefully, that doesn't get wiped out in February.
And as we kind of close out the podcast, these are the leaders for if you're on the YouTube or you want to go to the YouTube, we'll put this up as a video. But here's the leaders for the Detroit Red Wings. Alex DeBrincat has made his way up the assist ladder with 21. Raymond has 20. Gostisbehere has 20. Larkin has 19. And Seider has 17. DeBrincat has 17 goals. Larkin has 13. Raymond has 11. Fabry has 11. He's played absolutely phenomenal. And Daniel Sprong has 10. So, I mean, this team is performing like they should, especially in the goal department. They need to be better on the defensive department. Obviously, if you look at this, I mean, goals against per game 26, shots against per game 26. They need to get better at that. And look, no one's going to make excuses for this team, but Darren and you and me are in conjunction with this is the time to make a run right here.
And it's really their last opportunity to do that in my, not the last, I'd say second to last opportunity to do that. Because if they don't, it's going to be such an insurmountable or such a mountain to climb that it's going to become very demoralizing very quickly if they lose a couple of games. They've got to have that momentum. And that's really what it's about. It's about building that momentum, going into the All-Star game, All-Star break, feeling good about that. And then being able to come back and prepare for a lot of road trips in February where, they're going to have to really prove their worth. And so, everybody's going to start talking too. Plus you got the trade deadline that's looming and everybody wants, starts making all these kind of predictions about what's going to happen with Patrick Kane at the trade deadline, which by the way, I got to tell you, I don't think the Red Wings are going to be sellers at the trade deadline. I don't think Patrick Kane is going to go anywhere, to be honest. I believe, and I just saw it recently in some of the media posts that are out there, and it's something I believe. And I'm like, were they reading my mind or reading my notes for the podcast? Because what I think is going to happen with Patrick Kane, I think he's going to get an extension. I think I look forward to that. I want them to extend Patrick Kane for the balance of his career. I'd like to finish it up here in Detroit because I think that Patrick Kane will be incredibly valuable when we are significant competitors for the Stanley Cup, probably 2 to 3 seasons from now. If he's here, and even if it's his last year, he's going to go out on a winning note with his name on the cup yet again with the Detroit Red Wings. I think we're going to extend Patrick Kane. I think he really likes so much about being in Detroit. I think he's going to take it.
Yep.
And I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think he's going to go anywhere.
Well, here's what I heard. I heard that, the Red Wings, obviously, they don't want to sell anymore because They feel like it's gonna hamper the development of the young players selling so much, and then being so close to the playoffs, they're just kind of ride it out. I do think that the Detroit Red Wings will make a move in the terms of buying. I heard Elliot Friedman allude to this as well on the 32 Thoughts podcast. They could be looking at some defensive players, maybe a goaltender, but goaltender is kind of far and few between. There's not many good goaltenders available, and there's a lot of teams looking for goaltending. So that's a problem. But the second part about it, you talked about Patrick Kane wanting to be here. Grinelli from the Spit and Chicklets podcast said that he talked to someone who said that Patrick Kane, his heart was in Detroit. Vegas offered him a chance to live in suburban Las Vegas, which is it's great, right? We both
Right.
yes, that's a great ploy. The Boston Bruins offered that you're going to play with Pastrnak, which if you're a hockey player, playing with David Pastrnak is a phenomenal thing, especially if you're Patrick Kane. But all along it was Detroit. That's where he wanted to go. That's where he wanted to come. He wanted to come play here in Detroit, and he has roots here. I mean, he played, AAA hockey here with Honey Baked and Little Caesars, and I think that he will sign an extension. I believe he will, and I think that this Detroit team, I think they're going to make a run, and I think they're going to get in the playoffs. I think they're going to get in the playoffs comfortably. Let me put it that way.
I hope you're right. I don't have as much confidence in that, but I'll tell you what, one last comment about Patrick Kane. I believe when Patrick Kane was evaluating where he was going to go, he wasn't evaluating where he was going to go just for this season, the balance of the season. I think he was looking to see where he was going to land for the balance of his career. I think that's why he chose Detroit, because I think that's what he wanted to do. And and that's another reason why I think the decision to be in Detroit the balance of his career was one that he made before he came here this season. It wasn't a one season decision, in my opinion. Just certain things, you look for. He's got a somewhat young family as well. He's got a young, young child, and he's coming to the end of his career, and he's going to want to look for someplace that he's comfortable landing from a personal perspective. And I think that, he has a lot of, like you said, he has kind of connections here. He's got friends here. He loved the fact he gets to play with Alex DeBrincat, who are friends on and off the ice. DeBrincat's got a long-term contract here. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of things outside of the game, but yet related to the game, that influenced his decision to begin with. And I think it's going to, we're going to see that play out. But, as Steve always does, keeps everything close to the vest. And there's really no reason for them to disclose any of that. It's time to stay focused on the future for the Detroit Red Wings. And I think that Steve's moves are all pointing to that. And I hope you're right. I hope they comfortably make the playoffs and prove and start to show what kind of talent they really have.
Well, I look at the playoff picture right now. They're only 3 points back of the third spot, right? And I talk about goal differential as kind of that key that puts you above the rest, right? Detroit's at 7+ goals differential. There's only two teams that are better ahead of them right now that are ahead of them. You got the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are +14. You got the Flyers, who are no, the Flyers aren't better either. They're +6. So I mean, that just goes to show you there's so much wiggle room in the standings right now. And I like the way the Red Wings are playing. I think that they've kind of navigated a bad storm. I think when they get Husso back, they're going to become a better team. And I believe wholeheartedly that this team right now is poised to make a run. If they sweep the West Coast trip, that's such a key development in this whole thing, because I expected them to lose 2 of those games. I remember the last podcast we talked about, just winning 1, maybe 2. Winning 3 is phenomenal. If they win the game tomorrow against Anaheim, that's a phenomenal course correction for the Detroit Red Wings, because now they come home, they play the Oilers, they play the Kings, and then they go on the road. So it's a great time for them. They don't play no back-to-backs. I like that a lot, because back-to-backs really stress you out in terms of goaltending, in terms of lineup construction and everything. So I look at that as kind of a plus. So this team moving forward, I think they're in a better position than people think that they are.
Well, let's hope that we see that for sure. I think that win against LA was huge. It wasn't pretty, but it got it done, right? It was tense at some points. I mean, neither one of
It
those.
don't matter how you win, it's just if you win.
That's right. That's right. And so we'll take it. And that's what champions do is they fight through and they get those, dirty goals and those tough wins sometimes. And that's what it's going to take. So I look forward to seeing more of that. Hopefully tomorrow we lock this thing down. Hopefully we have 2 victories to celebrate here in the next 24 and 3 in the next 48. And everybody knows what those are, right? We want the Wings to win over Anaheim. We want the Lions to win over Vikings. And we want Michigan to become champions on Monday. I think they will.
It'll be great for the state, and obviously the Lions got a playoff game coming up, so that's even better. So let's just go and let's capture this momentum and just keep going. I mean, I know the Pistons are kind of like sucky right now, but you know what? Who cares? They're in the background. So we got Michigan football, we got the Lions, we got the Red Wings. Let's keep it going. Let's go to the baseball season. The Tigers start beating ass. So let's go.
Boy, you're very, very optimistic, and God bless you for that.
Well, I mean, I've seen some fortunes revolt, and I think that I do think the Red Wings are a good team. I think the Lions are a good team. I think the Tigers will be great this year. And to be honest, I think there's going to be some good times for Detroit because I think that we've dealt with enough bull crap over the course of like 5-6 years where we kind of seen teams, rebuild and try to get better, and it's kind of frustrating for fans. But I think that we're kind of turning the corner, and I think this Red Wings team is a lot better than people think. I think that they've kind of navigated a difficult storm with having the goaltender issues that they've had, with the health of the goaltenders. That's the main thing. And I think that they're going to move forward and they're going to be a better team. And I think that this is a great time for them because they don't have any back-to-backs, and that's the key part of this, Cindy. They have no back-to-backs, and that's what I look at. So it's been a great podcast, Cindy. We went longer than we probably thought we were going to go, but I think the people will love it.
Yeah.
I think the people will love it. And we'll see you guys on the next podcast of Red Alert, a Detroit Red Wings podcast. I'm Between the Whistles Detroit and Red Alert podcast and everything. Me and Cindy, thank you for listening and watching. Obviously doing it on a Saturday, there's not many people watching, but I know that people will listen on the podcast. So thank you for that. And we'll see you in the next podcast as we talk more Detroit Red Wings hockey. And hopefully by the next time we talk, the Red Wings are on a little bit of a more winning streak, maybe 2 more games added to it. That'd be great.
See you then. Go Wings.
All right. We'll see you guys and have a great one. And we will see you in the next podcast.